Welcome back to another tips video. In this video, we're talking about Relativity desktop client. Now, Relativity desktop client's application we use all the time, if you're a Relativity user, of course, when we load data outside productions, cross-reference files, overlays, whichever. But there's one option that I see that people misinterpret what it means, and it deals with extracted text files. So when we load extracted text, we pick our field on the left and a field from a dat file on the right, we match them up, and it's usually a path, so we check saying cell contains file location. What it means is Relativity needs to go to a path and pull data from an external file, and because of that there is an extra option that says encoding for undetectable files. And what I noticed is the way people read this is they kind of interpret it as encoding for files. And what it means is encoding for undetectable files. And it seems like people just ignore the word undetectable files and just say, no, this is where I said encoding for my files. So if you're a person who kept ignoring the word undetectable, I'm going to explain to you what this option means. So let's look at some of the text files, how are they encoded, how the information in them is stored, and that'll clarify what it means to have undetectable files. So here I made a text file, which is just a standard ASCII file, and it contains word test. Right, so we got 4 characters, and they're right here, T-E-S-T, right? And then over here we see hexadecimal values of those characters. So 54, 65, 73, 74. So again, we have 4 characters. So what we see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the same 4 characters. We're just looking at how computer stores those characters. And what you see that each character is, well, stored as a separate character in the way, which is kind of what we would expect, right? However, once we go, so let's say we go to 54, right, and we go 55, 56, how many positions do we have to store characters? Are we going to run out of it? And what we're doing here is we're using hexadecimal numbers. So when we get to 99, we are not going to run out of numbers. However, we are going to run out of numbers when we get to FF, which is 255. So that means we can store 255 different variations of characters per each position in the file, right? Which was fine for a long time when we, 255 characters will get us all the uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, symbols, all that stuff. But when it becomes a problem is when we need to start storing other languages, right? So when we start getting into other characters, other languages, we want to start putting emoji in there, right? So we don't have enough sort of positions to store them. So now what we started doing is using 2 positions. So we're taking 2 characters and we're combining them together to create another character, which could be an emoji or something else. And in order for computer to know that we're doing that, we're combining multiple characters to create a single character, we need to include some kind of header, some kind of indication that don't read this text file as 1 character at a time, read it as 2 characters or 3 characters or whatever the encoding is. And this is what the option in Relativity is talking about, is if you have a file which doesn't have that little header, how do we interpret that file? So what does the header look like? Because we looked at the ASCII file, right, or Western European or whichever, and this has no header, which is how the files would be stored if they're not Unicode. However, if we look at the Unicode file, you see that there are 3 characters, 1, 2, 3, have been inserted in front of the word test. And these specific characters, so EF, BB, BF, and let's switch to Wikipedia. So we have UTF-8, EF, BB, FF. So this is our indication that the file that's going to follow is UTF-8 encoded, which is what this is because I save it as UTF-8 on purpose. Now, if we have different encoding, like let's say UTF-16, we're going to get a different header. So FE, FF, so again, we could see this is our UTF-16 header. But the other thing you notice here is the word test doesn't use up 1 character per space for a character, right? We have 2 spaces for each character. So T and then there's blank. Well, this is what I was talking about before. We are going to be using 2 characters to represent each letter. So hopefully that makes sense. And also that's why whenever you're setting up a Unicode field in SQL database, you need to consider that the field will be double in size. So this is how IT people will tell you. If you have an 8,000 character limit for non-Unicode, this is why you have 4,000 character limit for Unicode text, which is a soft limit. It's not really a hard limit. But so now you see that we have a little header and our letters are stored differently. And this is what we're talking about in our undetectable files. All right, so if we have a file without a header, it is probably Western European encoding, so we should select that option as a default, which means if there is no header, fine, just read all the characters as 1 character at a time. However, if for some reason we were to have a Unicode file, maybe UTF-16, that doesn't have that header, this is what this option is talking about. What to do with Unicode files without a header, because if it's going to read them as Western European, it's going to have those extra characters in there. It's not going to read them correctly, or it's going to interpret them in a really funny way. And in my experience, I only had this happen once to me. Only once that I had a Unicode file without that header. Somebody probably made some kind of custom weird application and forgot to properly save it. So you're pretty much always going to have a Unicode header in Unicode files. That's why this option should stay as Western European unless you know there's going to be a problem. And what some people do is they tend to set this to Unicode, and then whenever you get text files, there's a collection of Western European and Unicode, and they're all intermixed. Well, the Western European text files don't get loaded properly. So I had that happen to me. If you had experience with this, put it in the comment section below. I'd like to know. I'm not the only one. And that's kind of it. This is the point of it, is if you have a text file without a header, how do you treat it? This is what this option is talking about. Normally, you just set it to Western European, and the relativity will do its job and interpreting whatever has the header properly and whatever doesn't as Western European, you'll be good. And if you have one of those weird situations when you do have a Unicode without a header where it should, this is the option to overwrite that. There you go. I hope my explanation makes sense. If you had experience with this, or if you had some kind of funny situations loading Unicode into Relativity or whichever, share it with me in the comment section below, and I will see you on the next tips video.